Hey everyone, whether you're a world-class artisan or just a kid using buckets and shovels, there's no wrong way to build a great sandcastle. A pastime for beachgoers around the world, there's a deep satisfaction in building something from scratch using nothing but fine sand all day, only to walk away and see it replaced by an empty space the next day after it's been washed away. And while anyone can build their very own sandcastle, there are some people that take things to a whole new level. So put on some sunscreen and join me for today's video as we count down the top 15 most impressive sandcastles in the world. Number 15. My Better Half. Perhaps the greatest rivalry in any form of popular media is shared by Batman and the Joker. The two have been at each other's throats since the 1940s, and they've managed to star in their own successful films. So it should make sense that people would want to create their own art of Batman and the Joker. But this particular sandcastle really goes against the grain in terms of vision and execution. For starters, the level of detail is pretty downright impressive. Everything from Batman's muscles to his ribs is depicted, and the ruffles and folds of the Joker's coat almost look too real. They even included his buttons and signature clownfish flower. Batman's gaze is intense as he stares ahead, perhaps trying to take his mind off the situation, holding hands with his arch nemesis. And the look on the Joker's face is enough to keep even the bravest beachgoers up at night. But the big sandy elephant in the room, as you can see, is that each figure is split right down the middle perfectly. And while creating the minor details of the sandcastle at large is impressive, how the artist got those perfect edges is perhaps the greatest enigma. And speaking of artists, My Better Half was made by just two people, David Ducharme of British Columbia and Marielle Hessels of the Netherlands. The two teamed up to tackle the Canadian Open Sand Sculpting Competition in 2015, with the theme that year being Heroes and Villains. Number 14. Medieval Times. For whatever reason, people from all over the globe love the medieval period of Europe. Whether it's the tales of lords and ladies or King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table searching for the Holy Grail, the lore seems to be endless. And while some stories of the time may stretch the truth more than others, we do know that the architectural style is based on reality. This artist took the idea of making a sandcastle quite literally, depicting a castle or citadel from times of old. The level of detail and artistry is just astounding, from the individual stones seemingly stacked on top of one another, to the window panes and the shingles on the roof. They even managed to create large sweeping steps up the sand and a small door for kings, queens, and their court to come in and out of. And best of all, the ocean itself is the castle's moat. This four-tiered, literal sandcastle is quite a piece of art and undoubtedly took hours to build. But all good things must come to an end, and instead of a dragon or an invading army, it was simply the rising tide that swept this once great kingdom away. Number 13. Rapunzel. It was Goethel of the Brothers Grimm tale Rapunzel who uttered the words that have now been etched not only into history but our collective minds forever. Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair so that I may climb the golden stair. And let down her hair she did, because that's exactly what's being depicted in this epic sandcastle. Taking the fairy tale to new heights, the sandcastle was sculpted at the Weston Sand Sculpture Festival in England in 2014. Having begun in 2006 by two Dutch artists, the festival has managed to withstand the sands of time and still exists to this day. The theme of this particular gathering was fairy tales, myths, and legends, and the Rapunzel sandcastle is just one of many spectacular works, which all used a grand total of 4,000 tons of sand. But instead of carving Rapunzel into her lonely high tower at the castle's apex, she likes sleeping peacefully below as the braids of her sandy brown hair slither their way around the gorgeously crafted castle and up to the top as if it were a snake. Perhaps this sandcastle shows what life was like for Rapunzel after she escaped the tower, and she still dreams of her time in a cold, lonely stone castle. Fitting then that the Sandman should make Rapunzel a dream of sand. Number 12. The Night's King. Next on our list is an epic sandcastle that shows off one of the more recent myths of our time, a Game of Thrones, crafted and constructed in the same festival as Rapunzel's Dream, the Weston Sand Sculpture Festival. This sand sculpture looks as though it's ready to destroy a castle rather than build one. Call them the Others, call them the White Walkers. This subject of the Night's King is not only here to destroy Westeros, but maybe even Weston. The attention to detail here is pretty crazy, and the White Walker's sinew of an old, cold, dying skin are on full display. Even with the way his hair is shown, one can feel that cold air of Westeros' winds north of the wall blowing through the whips of hair that remain. And notice how he holds a chain in his hand as if he's holding the cold reins of his even colder undead steed. And not to be outdone is the Iron Throne he carries with him, as if serving as a warning for all those enjoying the warm weather of King's Landing. And just like the Iron Throne of George R.R. Martin's creation, this sandy seat is complete with all of the steel, or in this case, sand swords that make up the incredibly uncomfortable throne, so that many kings and queens, lords and ladies have lost their lives over. Number 11. Lord of the Ring, Sandwood Sculpture Park. In Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, there were 9 rings given to the kings of men, 7 to the dwarf lords, 3 to the elves, and the one ring, which was forged in secret. And then there are the tens of millions, if not billions, of grains of sand used to create this fantasy scene at the Sandwood Sculpture Park. One of the most epic tales ever told deserves one of the most epic sandcastles ever made, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. Sandworth Weymouth is located in the UK, where each summer artists and sculptors come from far and wide to carve both their names and their works into the sand. A sandcastle of epic proportions, this depicts the great wizard Gandalf pitted quite literally head-to-head with Gollum, whose fall from grace due to the power of the One Ring is one of the saddest stories ever penned. In between them is the humble hobbit Frodo Baggins, who left his home of the Shire to come all the way to the sculpture park in the hopes of casting the One Ring into the fires of Mount Doom. Speaking of which, the artist clearly has an eye for detail, and just behind Frodo is the lidless eye of Sauron that sits at the Tower of Barad-dûr, and much like the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, this sandcastle will one day be washed away forever. Number 10. Forever 27. Every year in the month of December, Brazil's Playa de la Canteras plays host to the Sand Sculpture Festival. International sculptors continually demonstrate their prowess with sand, rising to the challenge each year. But one year saw the stellar entry known as the Musical Geniuses of the 20th Century. With their names spelled out for those too young to remember them, this work of sandy art depicts some of the true greats: Bob Marley, Kurt Cobain, Jimi Hendrix, Elvis Presley, and Michael Jackson. And aside from being some of the best, what else do these rock stars have in common? They have all sadly passed away, but luckily for beachgoers on this day, they get to see the likeness of these legends live again, albeit for a brief moment in time and sand. Everything down to the folds in Elvis's shirt, from Michael Jackson's Jerry curls to Bob Marley's luscious locks, are crafted in excruciating detail. And much like the stars it portrays, this sandcastle, these amazing musicians burn twice as bright and just half as long. Number 9. Sand Dragon. The next entry on our list is as comical as it is impressive. This sandcastle was made as part of the 2009 Oregon Sandcastle Contest, and while it may not have won the day, it certainly won over the hearts of many spectators that day. There is a lot going on here. The obvious is the dragon swallowing the one sent to smite him completely whole, and the dragon's sandy scales carved out in great detail make the beast look like it has a hide of stone rather than flesh and blood as it emerges from the depths of the sand to likely protect the old treasure chest that hides beneath the depths. But oddly enough, instead of bringing a sword to do battle with this fire-breathing prey, it seems that the ill-fated knight brought none other than a shovel. The Shovel Knight, indeed. No wonder he never stood a chance. And even amidst all the chaos and carnage, it looks like our brave Shovel Knight stands at a small sandcastle that's been crushed under the weight of his great adversary. The only thing that could slay a dragon such as this? None other than the waves of the ocean. Number 8. Your biggest fan. The Sun and Sea Festival, held in Imperial Beach, California, has a long and impressive history reaching as far back as 1960. Over 5 decades ago, a public festival of the same name was held to celebrate the date of the city's incorporation. But from 1980 to 2011, Imperial Beach hosted the U.S. Open Sandcastle Competition, where truly world-class sandcastle builders will compete for 5 full hours to create amazing and intricate sand creations and battle for the championship. And with so much talent in one place, it's tough to choose just one, but this particular sandcastle is just stunning. The amount of attention to detail here are beyond fathomable, and yet a very small team of artists were able to capture the young woman's emotion hiding behind her fan as she revealed just half of her face. Who knows what other secrets may be hiding behind this material? Lips, cheekbones, eyebrows, even eyelashes are all photorealistic here, displayed in the sand. This is the type of sandcastle that belongs preserved and on permanent display in a museum rather than on a beach, where it will soon be blown away by the winds and washed away by the ebbs and flows of not just time, but the sea. Number 7. Sandcastle Matt. The next entry on our list isn't one, but many sandcastles, all created by the man who simply goes by Sandcastle Matt. We certainly have no shortage of spectacular specimens here on this list. Sandcastle Matt takes the art form to new heights in more ways than one. Instead of creating sweeping seascapes or medieval castles, he opts for something called the drip method, which he uses to build up and up and up towards the salty sky. All he does is gather sopping wet sand from the shoreline, cup it into his fist, and let it drip, creating amazing pillars that look like a setting of an eldritch kingdom or even the pearly gates themselves. And while these works of art and silt will leave your jaw on the floor and your mouth full of sand, Sandcastle Matt's drip method isn't as crazy as it may seem. Yes, it requires a great deal of patience, but he's able to reach new heights by simply creating the structure using objects like driftwood, setting them up to his liking beforehand and letting it drip. It's pretty amazing how such a simple trick and a tool of the trade allows Sandcastle Matt to build something truly special. Number 6. Point Defiance Aquarium. Having a sign built for an aquarium sounds like a pretty normal idea. It can be made from wood, metal, or even something as cheap as plastic. But how about sand? Well, that's exactly what Sue McGrew did for the Point Defiance Aquarium and Zoo. Sue McGrew created this record-breaking 17-foot-tall sand sculpture on the aquarium's central lawn. This massive three-dimensional sand sculpture depicts a hammerhead shark swimming atop a sea of kelp, a green turtle moving placidly with the currents and trailed by schooling fish, a giant Pacific octopus with its bulbous round head taller than a child, a spotted eagle ray moving rapidly on waves of sand, dozens of jellyfish, and more undersea creatures. Her epic work seems to defy gravity, but the explanation is far simpler and grounded in reality. This sandy seascape began with a block of sand mixed with water. McGrew and her team pounded that wet sand down to make it almost like concrete. From there, they stacked boxes on top of each other so that by the time the team was done, it looked like a layered cake. But that's the easy part, because from there, the world-class sculptor had to get in there with fine tools and a steady hand, and some serious artistry and creativity to deliver the finished product. Number 5. Calvin Siebert. Calvin Siebert is an amazing New York-based artist known for his stunning sandcastles. And these aren't your typical fairy tale castles. Instead, he makes castles that look like the mind-bending work of M.C. Escher. Siebert had worked as a sculptor's assistant for nearly 30 years and managed to put everything he learned into the sand. The results are these perfect angular structures that have earned him international recognition. And unlike so many other epic sandcastles we've seen today, Siebert isn't making these modern marvels once a year at a contest. Instead, this is the artist's full-time activity. And while it may not pay the bills just yet, he said in interviews that he does this more than anything else, which would make sense considering the amount of time, energy, effort, and attention to detail it takes to make something like that. But the most beautiful part about Siebert's beachside artwork isn't just how they look or his woodworking techniques that go into them, but the fact that they are transitory. Some of these castles can be 8 to 10 feet tall, and for as much time as he spends on them, they'll be gone in half the time. It's not like a building where when it's done, it's there for a lifetime. But at least on the brighter side, because his medium is simple sand, not only can Siebert work wherever there are beaches, but it's a great excuse to travel the world and experience and experiment with all the different types of sand around the globe. Number 4. Marcio Matolius. It's a sad truth that owning a home just isn't in the cards for everyone, which leaves them with a lifetime of paying rent to someone else. It's a cruel fate, that is, unless your name is Marcio Matolius. But not only does Mr. Matolius avoid rent, but he hasn't paid any utility bills in about 20 years thanks to the special home that he's built. Living on the beaches of Brazil, Matolius is truly king of the castle, living in an amazing sandcastle of his own creation. And while it may not be Buckingham Palace, it's pretty impressive in its own right. To maintain the sandcastle's walls and turrets, Matolius needs to regularly water the sides of his castle to prevent the fine sand from crumbling in the city's year-round tropical climate. He needs to have patience too, because a single tropical storm can destroy the entire sandcastle in a matter of minutes, forcing him to rebuild the structure from scratch. Having done this for over 20 years, he's become well adapted to swiftly and efficiently reconstructing his sandcastle, and his work has even caught the attention of a local shopping mall that sometimes hires him to build decorative sand pieces for their displays. Number 3. The Cat Castle. Don't let the name fool you on this one. The castle made of cats isn't a palace dedicated to felines. Instead, it's an impressive sandcastle made of caterpillar-heavy machinery. This one took a lot of careful planning ahead of time before pulling out the big guns. We're talking about a CS54B vibratory soil compactor, Cat 924K wheel loader, D6N crawler, 320D and 336D hydraulic excavators, and a 3025C mini excavator to lay down the foundation. It all started with a wooden foundation, and from there, the cats laid on the sand in droves. Once that was done, the humans came in with tools and levels to get everything just right, down to the most minute of details. The finished product is truly extraordinary, and when the final touch was added, the flag at the top of the skyscraper, this cat-built sandcastle broke the world record for the largest sandcastle in 2014, coming in at over 42 feet tall. Number 2. Disney Cathedral. This sandcastle creation was built at the Disney Sand Magic in 2017, where artists were tasked with recreating some of the most memorable scenes from the Disney catalog. While each creation is astonishing in its own right, it was the cathedral that managed to stand out from the rest. The attention to detail here is so superb that it almost looks like the real thing. This Gothic-style cathedral is incredibly tall, and those towers of sand look as though they're reaching up towards the sky. From the shingles of the spires to the tall and thin archways, it's enough to leave your jaw on the floor. Even the Roman numerals and the hands of the clock almost striking 12 look like they're ready to pop out from the scene, and you could tell that this just took hours to get done right. And all of that sand is packed down so tightly that a gust of wind won't tear down that powerhouse. The artists were even using levels to make sure they get the finest details down superbly. Number 1. The Blokhus Sandcastle. In 2021, the gorgeous small seaside town of Blokhus in Denmark became the home of the world's tallest sandcastle. The sandcastle stands at 69.4 feet and weighs nearly 5,000 tons. According to Guinness World Records, the castle is about 10 feet taller than previous record-holding castles built in Germany in 2019, which called for 4,800 tons of sand. The intricately decorated structure is a vision and reminds of a pyramid. Dutchman Wilfried Steiger, the creator of the castle, had the world's 30 best sand sculptors assisting him throughout his castle-building journey. The castle was built by a team of sculptors led by Wilfried Steiger from Holland. It's shaped like a triangle so it doesn't collapse under its own weight. It's pretty clever. Another method used to keep the structure strong and sound, the sand contains 10% clay so that it glues better. The artists also applied an extra layer of glue on the structure so that it lasts through the winter. It's not the sort of thing your average beachgoer is going to come up with. The sandcastle has been sculpted with various figures, even including local elements such as beaches, lighthouses, and even windsurfing has also been incorporated into it. One of the sculptors said that the castle was built as a reminder of how the coronavirus shaped the world years prior, with the crown serving as the castle's corona on top. It's an incredibly gorgeous and unique creation that also serves as an interesting reminder of recent history. Let's hope it never comes down. We'll see you next time. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.